declare the decree. Yahweh has said to me, thou art my son, this day have I begotten thee. Ask of me and I will give thee the heathen for thine inheritance, the uttermost parts of the earth for thy possession. Thou shalt break them with a rod of iron, thou shalt dash them in pieces like a potter's vessel. Be wise now therefore, O ye kings, be instructed, you judges of the...
Hello, good morning, welcome to the Line by Line Bible Studies. We're continuing in the book of Psalms, and the songs of the Old Testament. Many of them actually from the worship of the first temple, going back to the time of David, of course, David being the notable psalmist, the most notable of all. And this here, Psalm 26, is a psalm of David. Judge me, O Lord, for I have walked in mine integrity. I have trusted also in the Lord, therefore I shall not slide. Examine me, O Lord, and prove me. Try my reins and my heart. For thy loving kindness is before mine eyes, and I have walked in thy truth. Okay, then he's going to go on to qualify this somewhat. Judge me, O Lord. Boy, you know, I'm not sure I've ever I don't know I've ever called on God to judge. God, judge me. Look at me. Look at me. I've walked in my integrity. I wish I could say something like this. Like I don't know. I mean, I guess I could be a little more generous. Like I said, if you know, the Psalms, David offers a variety of psalms, some of which he is very contrite, you know, about forgive me my iniquity, and you know, I mean, Psalm 51 and just even the last psalm, I believe, you know, look, he's talking about his affliction and pain. But you know, we've seen it where, you know, remember not the sins of my youth, nor my transgressions, according to thy mercy remember me for thy goodness. Tender mercies and loving kindness. So he's often very contrite in his attitude, but occasionally also he's bold. He's saying, look at me and judge me. And a lot of times I think really the Psalms, well, not just the Psalms, but human beings in general, and in the Psalms, we tend to look at ourselves on a sliding scale, you know, in comparison to other people. And since as a practice, I don't compare myself with other people and thinking I'm more righteous than they are. Or I say, God, judge me, and I'm thinking in comparison to other people. Though, you know, I think, when I think about it, I think I have. More when I was young. You know, I remember looking at, and I guess it goes with, I mean, I almost want to read, let's read a little more here, and we'll talk more about what he said. But I have not sat with the vain persons, neither will I go in with dissemblers. I have hated the congregation of evildoers, and will not sit with the wicked. I will wash my hands in innocency, so will I compass thine altar, O Lord. Okay, yeah, again. That I may publish with the voice of thanksgiving and tell all of thy wonderful works. Well, hold on there. And that's plenty to talk about. First of all, I want to just focus on this word dissemblers. You know, sometimes you run across a word in the King James and you're like, what does that word mean? We don't use it very much. One of the ways I find to help me understand is I try to notice what are the root words. Like dissemble. Obviously, it's the opposite of resemble. You know? Resemble, dissemble. To put together, to semblance. We have the word semblance, like when something resembles something, we say he bears the semblance of his father. A dissemblance, though, well, the Hebrew word actually means conceal. It means like concealed identity, fake, And certainly when it comes to fakeness, I can say, if I go into a certain context, like if I say being fake, like being a fake teacher, being a fake believer, I could definitely, say, I can stand before God and say, God, judge me. I've walked in my integrity. I do not go in with the dissemblers. I do not go in with the fake pastors. I do not go in with the those who teach for profit, for personal gain. I do not go in with blah 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 blah. So yeah, I understand. In the certain like in the context he's thinking of it, it doesn't mean I'm without sin. But in a certain context, I am faithful and true. I have integrity. I mean, that's what the psalmist is saying. And I suppose I could say that for myself, sure. In certain levels, I have integrity. Doesn't mean I can't make mistakes. You know what I mean? Everybody makes mistakes. And the fewer the better, right? But some people are actually fake and not really, I've talked about different people that I've encountered or people I know and trust have encountered and talked about what, fake religious people are like. Meaning, especially in leadership positions. Your average person who's only going through the motions at church, I don't... The impact of that is mostly personal. Though I do think, you get a church full of people going through the motions, you're going to start off, pretty soon you're going to have a pastor going through the motions. Because they're going to want a pastor that's going through the motions, not a pastor who's going to call them to actual action. Or a pastor who's going to lead them into something more characteristic of zeal. He's going to lead them instead into things that are characteristic of nominal belief. Picnics and field days or whatever. I don't know what field day is fun. One of my favorite days of school was the last week when we'd have our field days. We'd all go out and run and have our contests and who can do this the fast. I remember that they took all this stuff down, and I remember I was really good at the shuttle run, moving the eraser from one line to the other. So when he talks about this, we got to think of it in terms, I think, of not exactly a sliding scale, but a context. You know what I mean? He talked about his sins of his youth. He's had his sins. You got to be careful comparing yourself to other people, because you have the possibility of taking on the attitude known as holier than thou. I'm less sinful than you is another way to look at it. And we don't want to be that way, but I think it's different when you're praying to the Lord. You know what I mean? Because God isn't fooled. It's one thing if I go to you, like, if I say to you, and Arnold Murray did this, right? And God knows what the real story was, because his ministry is very well appointed with funds. But if I say to you, I'm not like other pastors, I don't take a salary, or something like that, right? That was his line. I don't take a salary either. There's no money to take a salary from. But it's a lot cheaper to have a worldwide reach in 2020 than it was back in 1980, and I understand that. So I don't fault him for having a ministry, but constantly signaling to people that you don't take a salary for teaching, especially when it's really specific like that. I always suspected he was being compensated, not for teaching, but for some other function. He is the president also of the SCN network. Right? Whatever. I'm not here to dig up dead bones, really. But it's an example to me. it was an important example to me, because it's like, it's one thing if I go to God and say, God, look at other people, they teach for money. I don't. I teach it because of love, or whatever. It's like, I don't want to, I'm saying this in front of you now only to explain that, like, it's different when you're talking to God, because that God knows the truth. You know what I mean? It's another thing when you're talking to other people. When you're trying to extol your own virtues to other people, it's a lot different, right? Stand by yourself, don't come near me. I'm not as sinful as you are. In interhuman reactions between humans, interhuman, that would be like between, intra is what I meant, I think, because inter would mean between different groups of humans, or whatever. Intra would be within the category of humans, I believe. But an intrahuman, or I don't know. I honestly don't know. But it's a silly thing to get hung on. But in interactions between human beings, you think about it, you really understand, like, how it's just being a braggart. It's being holier than thou, essentially, to say these kind of things. Like, if I were to stand up and just say, God, judge me. I've walked in my integrity. I've trusted in you. I mean, like I said, I don't think it's wrong of David to have done it, or by any means, or that it's wrong to say positive. It's like, it's better to let another man's lips praise you, but the Psalms are ostensibly directed at God. You know what I mean? It's directed towards the Lord. It's not directed towards men. David isn't trying to impress men with what he's saying. He's trying to communicate with God and make a point also for us to understand. But it's not like, look at me how righteous I am. What it's saying is, there's a comparison to be made between the servants of God and those who serve themselves or serve some other interest. So I've trusted also in the Lord. And so I've walked in my integrity. I've had integrity. I wonder what that word integrity is in Hebrew. I'm just, a bundle of curiosity. I already looked up dissemblers, which was, what I said, it was conceal. Alam, to conceal. That sounds a lot like the word olam, which is the word, means like, it's sometimes translated eternity, like time that's concealed, the future. Anyways, before I get off on tangents like that, I have trusted also in the Lord. I've walked in my integrity. Completeness, tome. I'm going to have to show you the actual word. I actually, when I look these up, it's mostly for me to make the, it's good sometimes to show. Also part of the high priest's breastplate. Interesting. The completeness portion of his breastplate. Usually moral innocence. Okay. Lord, you know my innocence. You know my integrity. I've trusted also in the Lord. Integrity also is a good translation of a word that means wholeness, because integrity means, like, I could talk about the integrity of a ship's hull, which means its hull is complete and without flaws and blemishes that might cause leaks. You talk about the integrity of some sort of part or machinery, and it means that it is undamaged, unmarred. We also have the word integral, which means it's a part that is essential to the complete function of an object. So that's a good translation of that word. Innocence is alright, but this is, more specifically, integrity is good, because it carries with it the idea of completeness and innocence. And if someone has a lot of integrity, we know in a moral sense what that means in English. I have trusted also in the Lord. Therefore I shall not slide. Saying, I walk in my integrity before the Lord. I trust in the Lord, and so therefore I will not, fall off of this. Because it's possible to slide, you know? That's why we say you keep the faith. Because if you don't keep the faith, you can slide. You want to start sliding around. You know, going away from the right path onto other paths, to unprofitable paths. And say, you know, because a man, you know, you can slip into these things. There's temptations. There's temptations in the world there whereby if we do not trust God, they will take us and they will drag us away from our integrity. I mean, like I said, you know, someone offers you a lot of, you know, like for me, for example, someone offers me a lot of money to something or other. I don't know, to do something or teach differently or do whatever, and it could be tempting, you know. Because I trust the Lord, I trust also that my feet shall not slide. And feet sliding is always sort of the idea of like straying from the path. You know, they don't have to actually get all slippery, like, whoa, you know. That's a funny thought, and that's maybe even the idea, like my foot shall slip. I guess when I think of slip and slide, I get two different ideas, don't you? And I don't know which one it means. Like, I don't know even if the Hebrew is going to give us any help on this, because it says, oh wait, slip or slide. Therefore I shall not to slip or slide, totter, shake. Yeah, this isn't going to tell me specifically. Because as you know, in English, if I say he slipped, it's a little different than I say he slid, you know? And I do think it comes from a primitive root that means to waver. I do think slip is what is meant here. Because it means to have I'm walking in my integrity and I slip and I suddenly lose my balance, you know? As opposed to slide, which I associate more with like a prolonged, you know, like we're not just a slip. I mean, a slip can turn into a slide, right? It's depending on where you're walking. If you're walking on a slope, a slippery slope, you slip, you will slide. So I would rather see this translated, therefore I shall not slip. I won't lose my footing. I will not, you know, lose my integrity. Examine me, O Lord, and prove me. Try my reins and my heart. Right? We talked about the inner parts, the reins. It's not entirely, you know, to the modern mind. We hear these things and we think, well, the brain does all the thinking, the heart and you know, and all they do is show their own ignorance, because it's like, in so many things, it's like people try to apply they have a thin veneer of knowledge of the most literal truths in the world, the most concrete ideas. You know what I mean? The hit your head over a brick kind of ideas. Like, the brain is where the thinking happens. Therefore, you know, to talk about judging my reins and my heart is like somehow a betrayal of the ignorance of the writers. It's like they didn't know about televisions and cars either. You know what I mean? So I guess that means also they were stupid, because they had everything they needed right there to build televisions and cars, but they didn't do it. You know, I don't know why they weren't as smart as us. They lived in another time, you know. It's not just, you know, we grew up in a world full of technology, but does anyone know how to make this stuff, you know? I mean, you know, could you whip one of these up? I was trying to pull up my phone. It's not even a, you know, I have a little flip phone. It is not even a smartphone. Not even a smartphone, but it's pretty damn clever as far as I'm concerned. It's got a calculator, a calendar, a messenger, you know, and a lot of other stuff it's got even a couple little terrible games on it, you know. I mean, compared to taking a quarter and using it as a payphone, which is the way I grew up, it's quite a change. And, you know, in the old times when they talk about different parts of feeling, you know, in the human experience, if you haven't noticed the psychosomatic effect that certain, you know, psychosomatic means the psychological effect, the psychological state of the person has on the body, something like that, where your mind has an effect on your body. And so there are certain issues that do definitely go right to your heart. Like, you feel heart issues. I have. If you've never been pricked in your heart, or had, you know, like, we feel like the pain from something, from like really bad news maybe, or a really serious threat, you know what I mean? Or had feelings that are like, that could be called truly heartfelt. Even though it doesn't matter that biologically the heart doesn't think, it is still a critical part of you as a person, your heart. It's thumping away there, pumping your blood. And your troubled thoughts can affect it. Certain thoughts do. The reins being more the kidneys, right? Yeah. The reins are and I just quickly moused over and it said kidney. We talked about this. It's like these things back there. And we don't have to like specify, oh, well, what's that mean? It means, you know, different. When they call it reins, though, I think of it as like the controls. Or the, you know, because like, you feel stuff in your stomach, right? Sometimes you feel bowel issues. It talks about my bowels, my bowels. But then the kidneys are like way back there. You know? Way up in your ribs there. I mean, way back behind your, you know, the front of your stomach. It's right in back under your ribs, just right there. And what did I precisely say before they represented? But I like the idea of them being like your deep gut. You know, and because they translated reins, I always think it means some sort of controlling aspects. In fact, did it say? And now I want to look it up again, just because I'm like, that's gonna okay, whatever. Blew that transition. The reins, my reins, the things that control me. I like it like that, but I'm not sure if that's exactly right. It's a kidney. Only the plural. A kidney as an essential organ, figuratively the mind as the interior self. Yeah, I know. Well, whatever. But in their, you understand, in their language, it's like we in the modern, with all our intellect today and all our know-how, we still say things are heartfelt. It's part of the language. It's not like some sort of, it's not a defect of the scripture that it doesn't just say brain every time. My brain, try my brain and my brain. You know what I mean? There's no beauty or art in this world of literalism and fundamentally fundamentally materialistic interpretations of reality. You know, and so you can't talk about, oh, try my reins in my heart, my innermost being, my innermost feelings. I think reins, though, are supposed to be directed towards ideas of thought, whereas heart is more feeling. And we'll leave it at that. Try my thoughts and my feelings. We'll let that suffice, right? Because it's going to be something along those lines. Prove me. Prove, it's going to mean something like test, I think. Prove me. It may mean approve. Let me just check. I just want to know. Examine me is bakan, to examine or try. Prove is to test or try. Okay. They're two words that mean very similar things. Examine and prove. They will do as ideas of testing. You know, I don't, honestly, God tests me, and I don't ask for a lot of extra tests. I don't say, God, test me. I may have said that at some point in my life. You know, I listen to the psalmist, I'm like, this man is bold. This man is love towards God, he has confidence. I like confident people, you know, I do. I like people who have that certitude. I don't always have it, but I appreciate it in others. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not one of those people who thinks everyone should be like me or think like me. It's hard for me to think like other people, but I don't expect people to think like me. Try to think like other people, but I acknowledge that it's hard. Certainly to feel others' feelings is also hard. Examine me, prove me. From thy loving kindness is before my eyes, and I have walked in thy truth. Your loving kindness, you know, a lot of times people don't see the loving kindness of God. You know, one of the biggest reasons people don't believe in God is because of evil. How can God be good with so much evil in the world? You know? And then they can't focus on the loving kindness of God because they're so distracted by all the evil that God has brought into the world. And so God hasn't brought evil in the world, man has through sin. Yes, I see your point, that the sin of man brought death upon man, and the sin of man caused man to be kicked out of the garden. Nevertheless, within the garden was the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, which imparted to the partaker the knowledge of good and evil, the knowledge of evil. So God put that tree in the midst of the garden. So God certainly created the possibility of evil. And then he created man with the capability of evil. And it says God created evil, you know. That doesn't mean God does anything bad. It means he just brings about calamity. He brings about pain and suffering. And that's the evil most people are talking about. Yeah, you know, people will say like, well, you know, they'll talk about evil in terms of like someone who's like a serial killer or someone who murders, you know, innocent children, stuff like that. And they'll say evil, and then they'll say that's a byproduct of human choice. In which case, I would say that's a problem also, because how will all things work together for good for them that love God, if God is always reacting to the actions of the evil? If their free will choices are creating byproducts in the world which are not accounted for in the creation of the world. You know what I mean? If there are just these evil deeds being done that God's like, well, there's another free will choice that's very unfortunate. And what is he compensating constantly for the plan? Compensating against the evil that was done? I don't think so. But I mean, it's an interesting way to look at God, as it's constantly trying to catch up, because that's what it would have to be. Because he would have to take every evil thing done and then turn it into something good. I mean, working together for good. But if all things come of God, and even the evil that is in the world is part of God's plan, then it can truly work for good. Or it truly is working for good, because it has an ultimately good purpose as far as the overall thing. And certainly the view I've always favored, I felt very strongly about, well, not always, actually, I shouldn't say always, but for the past 15 years, okay? I had trouble with predestination earlier. And also how to, you know, the free will aspect of our experience. You know what I mean? Like, I don't believe in free will from the perspective of God, as far as God creates a person and they are who they are. But from his perspective, they behave exactly as created. But from my perspective, I'm not a robot. I am choosing to do what I want to do. It's like I've often said, it's like, you know, people, when we imagine robots in our, you know, films and stuff, they're always rebelling against us and taking on a mind of their own is interesting. We still believe in free will, that even our robots have free will. Well, what's interesting is, then they would go and compare predestination to being like a robot. But everyone thinks robots, once they got intelligent enough, would be thinking on their own, not just doing everything as commanded with a thing. But the thing is, if you understood their programming and the what goes into it, their behavior should be totally predictable. Of course, understanding that programming, when you get to a sufficiently complicated level, it requires someone with the intellect of God to be able to understand and predict every, it becomes so inaccessible that only something as, completely astonishing, awesome, and awe-inspiring as a God could actually interpret it. If that's the right word I wanted. Interpret, could actually understand, whatever. Understand. Predict. They wouldn't be, it's not interpret so much. Predict. Or to specify. What he's going to do. Now he's going to do this. I got off track. Loving kindness is before my eyes. Does that all come from the reins in the heart? Try my reins in the heart. Know what's really controlling me. Whatever. Your loving kind. I'm always mindful of God's loving kindness. Oh yeah, that's why. Because I don't see just the whole world. They see it mechanistically. They see the evil. That's what I was talking about. The evil. That's how I got off on free will. Because evil always runs into free will when you talk to a lot of people. Because that's what they think the explanation is. Evil is explained by free will. And God's lack of, God doesn't want to mess with that. So he's saying a hands-off approach to it. First, I don't like it. There's a lot of implications of that, It's like, what exactly is he doing? I've walked in thy truth. Well, like I said, we do well to be mindful of God's kindness. Oftentimes, people who are very conscientious Christian believers, good people, can be caught up in guilt and other emotions that are unprofitable due to, they maybe having iniquity or having sins or being imperfect. You know what I mean? Having integrity in so many ways, but then maybe having emotional problems, or interpersonal problems that are not, in any way connected to the idea of sitting with vain persons and dissemblers and evildoers and the wicked. You know what I mean? Because the people I know who love God, it's like they have sins, but they're not they're not a big deal. There's something that's not acceptable, but it's not hurtful to everyone around them. Maybe it maybe robs people around them a bit. You know what I mean? In a sense of look at when you have trouble with drinking alcohol, it's there's a certain line that's where it's okay, and then, or at least a matter of conscience, right? I'm not going to tell you what to do with right and wrong on that, but you can step over that line and maybe not a lot of bad things follow. It doesn't hurt a lot of people, but you do kind of, that time you're under, your productivity, your potential to be useful to people is kind of limited. You know what I mean? I know what I mean. You just are limited. I never, when I would drink, I never remember being productive at all, except in relaxation and rest, which is the only reason I've really wanted to use that ever. in I mean, in recent history, when I would use it, it'd be for like, oh, so I can sleep. And I do think, like, Paul talked about having a little glass of wine for your stomach's sake, especially before bed. There can be no sin in that. Yeah, I mean, it's possible. What I'm saying is, it's possible to have no sin in a moderate amount of that taken at bed or something like that. But then you start off like that, and pretty soon it becomes an immoderate amount. It's easy to get to more because a little feels good, a little more feels even better. A little more and you don't feel anything. And now in the morning you're hungover. And you're hurting, right? And people around you are suffering too because you're not at 100%. And is it a big deal? It's not. It's not as a big deal as the pastor who dissembles before his congregation, as the vain persons who interject their vanity in every aspect of life. I mean, like, don't even know God. Yeah, it's better, but you're still robbing the people around you. You're still, you're still not serving properly. You know what I mean? And the same thing with a lot of the sins that people suffer from. Alcohol is an easy one to pick on. But, sometimes it can be fear and emotional problems giving way to, not trusting the Lord and things that can be destructive. But it's not at the level of what he's talking about as far as sitting with vain persons. Vain is going to be pretty strong here, actually. Vain meaning, it's probably gonna, is it aven? Which one is it? There are several words in Hebrew. Hebrew has a lot of colorful words for vanity and for evil and wickedness. So look at the wicked and the vain. Evildoers. Ra'ah. Oh, shav. Yeah, that's a pretty strong word in Hebrew. Evildoers. The wicked are what? Rasha. Those I'm familiar with. I often forget what exactly they mean because a lot of the original research I did was 20 years ago. Like my wife says, how do you know things like about history and stuff? I'm like, because I remember from high school. I just have it's a very fuzzy memory. It's a very general memory, but it's very broad, which gives a overinflated sense that I know what I'm talking about. Okay. Is the essential function of that memory. Meaning I seem to know more than I actually do because I know a little bit about a lot of things. And that's the truth. Alright, so shav, from the same as show, in the sense of desolating evil as destructive. Yeah, the Hebrew word for, in modern Hebrew, the Jews call the Holocaust the Shoah. And I think it's similarly derived from show. The Shoah, the desolation. It's an evil as destructive. Shav. And it's falsely lying, vain vanity. It's used mostly, let's see, it's translated here, falsely, lying, vain vanity. Evil as destructive, literally ruin, or morally guile. Figuratively idolatry, as false, subjective. Uselessness, as deceptive, objective. Also adverbially in vain. Let's look at this root of this word show so we understand the basic. Perhaps a ravage. Ravages. Shoah, there's the Hebrew word for Holocaust. Unused root meaning to rush over a tempest, by implication, devastation. Okay. So like I said, it is a much stronger word. Like, the vanity is not, vanity is not just like, hold on, I gotta mute the mic and cough my brains out here for a second. That was a good one. So, vanity is not what you might think of, like, oh, we're sitting around and having tea and we're just talking about vain things. Have you seen the horses racing? Did you go play croquet? I don't know why I'm going to make fun of the British. Susan was talking the other day that they're going to start putting up a new bridge over the or I don't know, bridge. I was going to say statue, but then I thought I'd end up in a political territory, and I don't really want to be. Believe me, I got enough political crap going on when I'm not. Sorry about the profanity there, by the way. Crap is profane. I got enough political stuff going on without bringing it into my Bible study, which is, I don't, as much as I know some people might appreciate it, I like to keep it separate. Because I like to focus on the Lord. Though, when appropriate. I just don't like to insert it into everything. I don't want it to become like a thing, just getting inserted into our daily walk with the Lord. Vain person's much stronger. Not just like we think of vanity as like, oh, it's so like we think of vanity. My first thought is vanity is someone who is over preoccupied with their appearance, right? That's the first thought you think of vanity. You're so vain, right? What's her name? The song, You're So Vain. You probably think the song is about you. You're so vain. Sorry, I forgot your name, lady who wrote that song. But I do remember who the song was about. Can't remember his name either, though. Whatever, it doesn't matter. I've not said with vain persons. It means something a bit stronger. It means destructive, liars, idolaters. It could mean any of those things. It's not specified. If we really knew Hebrew, we really have a feel for it. But when we went through that definition, and I realized I still haven't switched back to regular study mode. When you go through that definition of vain, you really do get the sense that it has a wide application. You see the kinds of things: lying, destructive, empty, It comes from a word that means to ravage, and I suppose the way a ravage leaves chaos and destruction and destroys order, destroys life, empties things of meaning. In fact, empty of meaning is a good thought to put into the idea of vanity. It's not meaningful. It's not productive. It's not, it's purely external, purely focused on gratification of now. Maybe that's a bit of a stretch, as far as I'm like getting too specific. And we talked about dissemblers, fake people. They don't resemble, they dissemble. They don't have the semblance of a Christian. He dissembled and put on the semblance of a godly man, but he was far from being godly. That was weird. It was just probably one of the dogs just loping along outside. I don't usually see them outside my window because we extended our fence. I have hated the congregation of evildoers. I hated the congregation, O Lord. I hated, O Lord. Lord, I hated. Not supposed to hate. Oh, it's okay. It doesn't mean I hate each individual, but I hate their group. As a group, I hate them. You know what I mean? I hate the congregation of evildoers. Evildoers is another Hebrew word for evil. The most common one, which is ra'ah, as breaking up that which is good, is the common word for evil. And when it says the Lord creates evil, I believe that's the word it's used. It means calamity. Those who bring about calamity. Those who do evil. There's a scripture that says the Lord will do neither good nor evil. That's what they thought. But the Lord does bring evil. The Lord does evil. The Lord does not sin. The Lord does not do wrong. Here's the thing people don't understand. Evil is not the same as wrong. It's not the same as wrong. An earthquake is evil, but is it wrong? There's no moral right or wrong with an earthquake. I mean, it just is what it is. And when you decide, and then people say, well, but people suffered, so it's wrong of God to allow that earthquake to happen. It's wrong because let me put it this way. Our suffering doesn't make anything right or wrong. Doesn't make anything right or wrong. God's decree is what makes things right or wrong. And I mean, there is a moral sense that the conscience has of what is right and what is wrong. And you see all the evil happen, but the thought is that they are the privilege of being alive is something that people have coming. People that they are owed. When people die in a disaster, all that happened was justice. If a meteor crashed into my house, I would be very unhappy. If it killed me and my family, or just my family, whatever. It's like Job. You suffer these things. But what am I going to say? I don't deserve to. I'm farther than I deserve to be. I'm at a place where I've got my eyes on God's loving kindness, because I shouldn't be here. I should have died off long ago. When I was a child, I probably should have died. I'd already become such a wicked sinner. I was a sinner from the womb. I was an ornery, mean child. Not always, but my family say I was sweet in some ways. But I could also be very, like all children, rude, crude, almost animal in my passions, uncivilized. And I did not live up to the life that I was given, But with God's help, I can live up to it, but I need more time. I've needed a lot of time, and I need yet a bit more. And I don't want to die. But if death happened to me, I can't say it's unjust. It's unjust that I died. It's wrong. It wouldn't be wrong. It'd be unfortunate. I would be unhappy if I could have feelings. If I knew I was going to die tomorrow, I'd be like, oh no, I don't want to die tomorrow. I want to keep living. No, for a certainty, thou shalt die tomorrow. Well, I don't want that. I want to live. But I have nothing to complain against God. And He's the one who's called me home. They talk about death being, the Lord's calling me home. Right? Isn't that what we say? Time's up. Everyone gets time up eventually. You think you deserve the long life, huh? Oh, we're special. I forgot. We're special. We deserve to live long. Those other people, well, that's what, and then we see their lives cut short and we say that's wrong. It's like whistling in the dark. God shouldn't do that. That's wrong. No, it's not wrong. It's just evil. It's just evil. Evil has come upon them. God brings evil upon us. God is not Himself evil, though. You know what I mean? You don't have to be evil to bring evil. But there are those who are evil, who do evil. You know what I mean? And I also draw the line like this. God is the creator and the judge of the earth. In fact, He's been called on in this psalm to judge David. It's a psalm of David, right? Yeah. Judge me. Judge me. There are evildoers in the world, men who do evil. Why is it okay for God to do evil but not for men? Right? Because He's bringing about evil. I mean, some people disagree. I don't know how, because the Bible says, I form the light, I create darkness. I'll just bring it up. I'll just bring it up because I want to finish this thought. It'll be a good thought. I hope so. I say that because it's funny I say that. It's like, it'll be a good thought because I'm not sure what it is yet. I know what it is, sort of, but I'm not sure how it's going to be said. That's never certain. Was it verse 7? I form the light, create darkness, I make peace and create evil. I'm just saying. Not moral evil, not moral wrong. Moral evil is something else. It wouldn't even be this word. Like this word, it can be used for moral evil, you know? And here's the thing. God is a judge. You know, he brings about the sentence. It's up to him. He has also perfect vision of judgment. So the things he does are not evil, morally. But when men do these things, it is. Because God has not given us the right to deny other men their lives, to deny other men their freedom, to deny other men their rights, their freedoms. I'm not allowed to deny someone, to just take someone off the street and chain them up in my basement. That's evil. I don't have the right. And for what purpose? For justice? Some people have taken it upon themselves to do justice. We even have justice, the idea of justice among men. We try to bring about justice. That's the point of the justice system, is to make things right. Not just to punish the evildoers, but to set things right. We have civil courts for settling disputes and such. People have disputes. It is not given to us to do God's sole. We'll say to people, you're playing God when they do certain acts. And they start playing with life. They start, having different moral standards, perhaps, than the righteous, The righteous ones standing up by God, they're sort of being a God to themselves. I've even had this accused of me, like, you're a God yourself. Okay. Could you explain that? It's like, you're a God of your world. You don't, it was mostly just people not listening to each other. As can happen. The congregation of evildoers, people who do evil in the sight of the Lord, those who do evil in the sight of the law, those who do evil in the light of their conscience. And I will not sit with the wicked. Remember the first Psalm, sit in the seat of the scornful, right? And this is not, we think of this literally. Often. Like, I have not sat with vain persons or gone in with dissemblers, and I've hated the congregation of evil. What is this congregation? Maybe he's talking about literal, like, idolaters, churches that are evil? Things like that? Could be more of a metaphorical sense, right? Like, when I go in with the evildoers, it's just by participating in the same things they do, and I'm part of that crowd now. I'm in with them. I don't need to go to a meeting of dissemblers of America, to become a dissembler and to sit with them, right? To go in with them, to go into church like a dissembler. I don't have to join other dissemblers in a place. I just join them in doing what they do. I've joined the congregation of evildoers by doing evil. I sit with the wicked by being wicked. It's not like I just keep this wickedness to myself. When I do wickedness, I become part of them automatically. I am now in their congregation. Welcome to the church of Satan. Let's do wickedly. I will wash my hands in innocency. So will I compass thine altar, O Lord. Compass thine altar. Surround thy altar? Encompass? To go around, turn about, surround. I'm not going to bring it up. Yeah, compass. So I wash my hands. To approach God, you had to clean you had to wash before you would go into the temple. Before you go into service or to make offering before God, you were to wash up. The Pharisees turned that washing into like the ceremonial thing they did constantly, like when they ate. But certainly at the temple, at the altar, it would make sense to clean up and wash up. And I think when he says wash my hands in innocency, we have the idea of washing your hands like Pilate washed his hands when he condemned Christ to death and saying, this is yours, this belongs to you. Well, I don't think you can necessarily do that. You can wash your hands all you like, and the physical blood comes off, but the metaphorical blood never comes off. What you've done, you've done. It's the only thing that's going to take it off is the blood of Christ covering it. So all God sees is the blood of Christ and not your bloody deeds. But maybe this means, so that may mean I wash my hands. I'm innocent, like Pilate did. I'm innocent of this man's blood. I wash my hands of this matter. I don't want to have anything to do with this. Of course, in this context, he's going to the altar of God, washing his hands. He's not trying to, I guess you could say he's ridding himself. I wash my hands of vain persons and evildoers and the wicked. I wash my hands of that so I can come before your altar. That sounds pretty good. Or my other thought was that I'm innocent, but I wash my hands in any case. My hands have done no evil, but I wash them to come before you. Because even though I have been good, I still wash my hands out of respect for your holy altar. Maybe that, I will compass your altar with hands washed and with an innocent conscience. Certainly when looking to whatever he has in mind here. It's like, when it comes to certain things, I'm innocent too. I haven't sit with the most evil men. I don't want to get into it. I don't want to sit up here and start praising myself. Not that I got a ton of stuff to come up with. But I could come up with one or two things to say on my own behalf, but if it's like, you don't need to listen to that. Tell of all, that I might publish with the voice of thanksgiving and tell of all thy wonderful works. To effectively preach, we know we have to walk right. This doesn't help the preaching if we are all wrong. If we're not walking right, it's hard to preach. You can still do it, but you're not doing it. But what I mean, it's hard to preach. What I should say is, it's hard to please God in your preaching. Because I guess from the beginning, when it said dissemblers, I think of preachers. There are all kinds of preachers in this world. There are preachers of Christianity, preachers of Islam, preachers of Judaic religion, right? There's the preachers of the various other minor faiths. I was going to say Buddhism, but then I said minor, and I don't want to slam Buddhism as a minor thing. I know it's quite big in the world. But there are other smaller religions that have their adherents, right? But there are also political preachers, social preachers. Art is a form of preaching. And that's why there's a lot of heavy equipment moving down my road. That's why I make music and stuff for political reasons, because it is a form of speaking, is a form of preaching. It is a publishing of things. I want to publish and tell of all of your wonderful works. People publish all kinds of things, right? And when they're hypocrites in those things, it is not, and it comes out, it's usually highly damaging to the cause. That's why, Christianity has suffered very much from the sins of pastors who stuck their faces in front of the nation, built themselves giant ministries based on basically collecting money from old grandmas, and by being on TV and saying, my work really needs to go on. Isn't this a wonderful program? Don't you want to see more of it? Well, please send me your money, And then they get I always think of, Jimmy Swaggart. There are some other guys, not a big fan, but I'm not going to pick on as much because it's like, I still pick up Swaggart on the radio, And he had that, God forgive him, but still, he made himself this huge ministry and then spent time in his hotel room, with prostitutes. Actually just chilling with them. It didn't get to the sex part. Maybe it would have eventually. I don't know. I mean, playing with fire there. I'm just meeting with that wasn't his testimony. That was the prostitute's testimony. I forgot what he just watched them or whatever. He didn't participate. He's getting right up to the, that's like, you go, that's like somewhere beyond pornography. I'm not exactly sure where that is. I've never engaged in anything like that, but it sounds real dangerous to me. Sounds real dangerous to me. And it was dangerous to him. He ended up weeping, apologizing on TV. There's famous clips of it, right? And that's how important our moral integrity, it brought disrepute on the idea of, every televangelist afterwards carried that stink a bit, as televangelists are adulterers with weird, not weird, but with, sort of unusual sexual appetites. Not that unusual. I don't think it's that. But I mean, it's like, he wasn't, it's unusual because he was still trying to maintain his integrity. Poor fellow. He was trying to be, he's probably trying to, console himself like, well, I didn't actually touch them. I just sort of watched them. It's like, whatever. Then when I say them, I don't remember the details. So, I don't remember the details. I just know that there was something sort of short of actual, of what you actually might think someone might get up to in a hotel room with prostitutes, right? So he was just a little better than quite a number of folks. If I want to publish with the Voice of Thanksgiving and tell of all God's works, man, that's one of the reasons I'm thankful I don't have a huge ministry, because as I readily admit, it's like, I'm not a big God judge me. It's like, because judging myself, I already feel inadequate as it is. And besides, I more, God, cover me with your son's blood, that my judgment be not as I deserve, Oh, we're in an hour. All right, we'll start at verse 8 tomorrow. Thanks for joining me in this study. We'll pick it up with verse 8 tomorrow. And until then, have a nice day.
I will declare the decree. Yahweh has said to me, thou art my son, this day have I begotten thee. Ask of me, and I will give thee the heathen for thine inheritance, the uttermost parts of the earth for thy possession. Thou shalt break them with a rod of iron, thou shalt dash them in pieces like a potter's vessel.